Good morning, Wabash. Giving today's chapel talk is Dr. Rhoades. Raised in Phoenix, Arizona, Dr. Rhoades received a BA in French from the University of Arizona and an MA and PhD in history from the University of Iowa. Dr. Rhoades arrived at Wabash College in 2002. Since her arrival, she has served as chair of the Department of History and taught numerous courses in European and world history. Her medical history and sexuality and gender in modern Europe, to name but a few. In addition to her teaching, Dr. Rhoades has given campus talks on Wabash's unique environment, teaching women's history, and her research on prostitution during World War I. Supportive of international experiences for students, Professor Rhoades has led many off-campus trips to Alsace, Paris, France, and as well as Wabash's immersion learning courses. As a professional historian, Dr. Rhoades continues her current research on 19th century morality in the city of Bordeaux, France. Giving her talk titled 20 Minutes, Dr. Rhoades.
Well, good morning. First, I want to thank the members of the Sinks Club for having me today, inviting me to speak, and I'd like to thank you all for coming as well. It's nice to be part of the tradition that welcomes you back after spring break. And I know that this week it's kind of hard to get back in the swing of things, so I doubly appreciate it. Today, I'd like to reflect and provide you with a few things to consider as you move toward March Madness. It starts on the 19th, by the way. As I look back through my files, I realize it has been some time since my last chapel talk. In that discussion, I presented my thoughts on Wabash, its students, and the community of which I was a new member. I reflected on how well Wabash students took care of each other. Many things have happened since that talk. The war in Iraq has wound down, but that matters little if you are currently in your third tour of duty. Osama bin Laden is dead, and for many that is a point of joy. Here at Wabash, we've seen veterans matriculate, adding to the richness that is Wabash. We've lost members of the community. As a nation, we've seen female vice presidential candidates run for office. We've seen an African-American president elected twice. We've experienced a significant downturn in the economy. Internationally, we have witnessed agitation for political change and democracy in the Middle East, a period now called Arab Spring. A few days ago, an infant born with HIV was cured of the virus. It is a mixed bag of up and down, good and bad. As I first considered the issues I might speak about today, diversity at Wabash came to mind. It's been a popular topic lately, and it seemed an important topic to continue. However, December 14th, 2012, changed my plans. If you do not remember December 14th, I can't blame you. I can't remember what I cooked for dinner last Wednesday, but I assure you it was delicious. So, let me turn to something else. Allow me to ask you what you can do in 20 minutes. Reflect. It's not really a lot of time. I suppose you could go to the library for a coffee between classes. It's enough time for Corey Egler to do several air raids. It's enough time for Chris Widdop to stop by and swipe some chocolates from the bowl on my desk on his way to class. It's time enough for Professor Perez to begin to discuss a paper with a student. She may finish an hour later, but that's a different issue entirely. It's not enough time to drive to the Cactus on a Friday night. Now keep that in mind, what you can do in 20 minutes. While you do that, I want to tell you a story. This is a true story. One day, Neil Heslin took his 6-year-old son, Jesse, out for breakfast. They had coffee and hot chocolate. They talked about what they would do that day. When Mr. Heslin dropped his son off at school that bright, sunny morning, a morning very similar to today's, Jesse, the little boy who loved horses and all things cowboy, stopped. He leaned back into the truck and hugged his dad. For some reason, Jesse gave him a pat on the back and said, "Everything's going to be okay, Dad. It's all going to be okay." He ran off, but stopped and he ran back. He said, "I love Mom too." And he ran off again. To have fun, to play, to learn more about what big people do, to explore a world filled with wonders. Except it was 9 a.m., it was December 14th, and his school was Sandy Hook Elementary. Everything was not okay. In 20 minutes, the little boy Jesse would be dead, lying among 19 other equally small, equally dead children, killed by tumbling bullets. Gentlemen, and I'm really addressing our students now, all you guys sitting here in front of me. This talk is about gun violence in the United States. Americans are notorious for having a political memory that lasts about 20 minutes. So I wanted to describe the events of that morning to remind us of what happened. Today, I will raise issues related to gun violence to ask us, as a community, what we want our world to be. If it is a world where the use of high-powered assault weapons during homicides is acceptable, where gun violence is increasingly commonplace, then it's time to admit that world comes with a cost. Perhaps the cost will be mass shootings that horrify us for a few days, a week, a month, then disappear from our daily discussions of what is important. Shootings that are normal. Before going further, I want to say this. My remarks today will not address the Second Amendment, the policies of the NRA, or mental illness, although those are all very serious things to consider. Instead, my remarks are a reflection on our national conversation about gun violence and its costs. To start, I'd like to consider the numbers and offer them to you. We will add them to what happened on December 14th. At Sandy Hook Elementary School, 20 small children were murdered by a man who was clearly deranged, and by no means should he have had possession of or access to weapons of any kind. He shot his way into a locked school in order to reach the children, and I agree that it is probably true that nothing could have stopped him. The same is true for the shooting last summer in Aurora, Colorado. The man who entered the theater at night, dressed in pseudo-bat attire, threw smoke bombs into the packed theater and began firing with his weapon. He was not stable by any means. He has since undergone psychiatric evaluation, lost that groovy orange hair, and is awaiting trial. He will plead insanity. Between the two incidents, 38 people died, including the children. The question is, in terms of gun violence, homicides, is that an important number? Finding the real numbers for gun fatalities in the United States is very tricky business. It seems that everyone has a source of numbers and each source has an agenda. So I will try to simplify with a sample for better or worse. To put things into perspective, from 2006 to 2010, according to the FBI, 47,856 people in the United States were murdered by firearms. That's about 13,000 people a year and does not include hunting accidents, cleaning accidents, or accidents where children playing with firearms inflict a wound that results in death. Some have argued that in comparison, daily gun violence in the United States, which crosses all ethnic and class lines, is a more serious problem than the 20 children murdered in their classroom. In fact, as of March 11th, 2,590 people had died in the United States as a result of gun violence since December 14th. Yesterday, that number had risen to 2,635 people. It will rise today. And yet, Sandy Hook and the children killed there have started a national conversation that has endured. Part of that conversation has focused on the costs associated with gun violence. But I'll suggest that those costs are multiple. A recent report in USA Today cited a post-Newtown study by a man named Ted Miller on gun violence-related costs in monetary terms. Quote, gunshot wounds and deaths cost Americans at least $12 billion a year in court proceedings, insurance costs, and hospitalizations paid for by government health programs. That's Medicare and Medicaid. This amounts to about $5.4 billion in tax revenue lost because of lost work, $4.7 billion in court costs, $1.4 billion in Medicare and Medicaid costs for firearm injuries and deaths, $180 million in mental health costs for gunshot victims, $224 million in insurance claims processing. You get the idea. It is widespread. But perhaps I'll go out on a limb. You could argue that this is beneficial to the economy. An industry has grown up around gun violence in America. But there are still other costs. Gun violence extracts a cost from first responders, something that is very easy to forget. We assume that all first responders are simply doing their jobs. They should be used to this. Michael McGowan, one of the first police officers to enter Sandy Hook, said, "One look and your life was absolutely changed." The accounts from Sandy Hook police officers, the first on the scene that morning, are haunting. They have said their memories are now filled with the grisly, ghastly memories and details and a few faint instances of hope. For example, one child had a slight pulse, but carried out by an officer did not survive. He must live with that. A little girl was found bloody but unhurt, in shock, and standing quietly, staring off into space among her fallen colleagues, the other children. A first responder made the choice to leave her there while he secured the area. He later used his best daddy voice and walked her out, telling her not to look around. He must live with that. The Newtown first responders will live with post-traumatic stress, potentially for the rest of their lives. Some of the police officers now can barely sleep. Little things can set off tears. A television show, a child's laughter, even the piles of gifts the police department received from across the country. One detective, who was driving with his wife and 2 sons, passed a roadside memorial on Route 25 2 weeks after the shooting. He began sobbing uncontrollably. He said, "I just lost it right there. I couldn't even drive." Another officer said, "Words can't describe how horrible it was." He was a veteran detective who had been with the force for 27 years. On March 6th, the Associated Press reported that 5 officers are currently on leave because of their experience at Sandy Hook. More are expected to have difficulties, and Connecticut lawmakers are investigating ways to adjust workers' compensation to support the first responders. Currently, it does not. They want to support them and their PTSD treatment needs. This further adds to the monetary cost of gun violence in America. But this does little to diminish the cost to those first responders. For ordinary adults, you and I, the people sitting in this room, gun violence has reached a tipping point and has also exerted a cost on us and on daily life. Recently, the Washington Post reported that, quote, "Americans worry more about gun violence than losing their jobs." The Kaiser Family Foundation conducted a poll that discovered that Americans are more worried about gun violence today than losing their jobs or paying their mortgages. Of those who expressed a concern, more than half knew a victim of gun violence. And I should probably add at this point, my father was shot with a 9mm about 10 years ago. He survived, but he was shot about 6 inches from his abdomen. That seems very distant now and almost trivial in comparison to the other numbers. Now, this is all well and good, you may say, but Rhoades is clearly a peacenik. We need guns. We need them to protect ourselves. If that's what you're saying, my response is very simple. Do we? Do we need guns for protection? In February, the New York Times reported on gun violence and its connections to gun ownership. As it turns out, several studies have shown that guns are rarely used to protect hearth and home. In the 1990s, a team headed by Arthur Kellerman of Emory University looked at all injuries involving guns kept in the home in Memphis, Seattle, and Galveston, Texas. They found that these weapons were fired far more often in accidents, criminal assaults, homicides, or suicide attempts than in self-defense. For every instance in which a gun in the home was shot in self-defense, there were 7 criminal assaults or homicides, 4 accidental shootings, and 11 attempted or successful suicides. For children and women, the danger is even greater, and a new marketing strategy to develop the gun sales market creates even more dangers. That strategy to sell pink weapons and those with sparkles to women further increases the danger in the home. In early February, a 3-year-old was killed in South Carolina, shot in the head as he and his 7-year-old sister played with a pink 9mm. Rhoades, you may ask, what does this have to do with me? I am a responsible gun owner. I'm not mentally ill. I'm not a nut. I care for my weapons, and I lock them up. My weapon is an antique. I use my weapons for target practice. That's it. I agree. I really cannot argue with any of this. In fact, in the February 1st issue of The Bachelor, Corey Kapitsky reported on post-Newtown events and interviewed Andrew Detmer about gun ownership. Mr. Kapitsky's reporting was very balanced, as good reporting should be, and I was very proud of both of them. He referenced the Second Amendment in his report and how statistics can be creatively used to make an argument about gun ownership, either for or against. Mr. Detmer's comments in the interview were also measured. Though he reported the ownership of 2 AR-15s, he noted that, quote, "This is not a gun problem. This is a societal problem." And in fact, I couldn't agree more. That's the key. Gentlemen, you will soon go out into this larger American society as independent, tax-paying citizens. You will have certain rights and privileges. I am not proposing today or asking for a solution from you. I am not asking for one tomorrow. I am asking that you consider what you want that society to be and the many costs of gun violence in America. As I finalized my talk yesterday, Newtown reappeared in the news again, and a shooting spree occurred in New York. CNN published on its website a timeline of the worst mass shootings in the United States, as if there could be a good mass shooting in the United States. Gentlemen, I ask you if America will be a place where gun violence is commonplace and mass shootings happen so frequently that we no longer wince at them, that we forget them in 20 minutes? Or is America something more and something better? Are you, gentlemen, better than this? Returning to the title of my talk, there's a good deal you can do in 20 minutes. On a mundane level, I gave this talk. You had a few donuts. You had some coffee. But on December 14th, in 20 minutes, 26 people, 20 little kids, died very, very violent deaths. Today, I have asked you to reflect on the events at Newtown and the costs of gun violence for our society. I expect in the last 20 minutes, some of us have privately mourned those who died at Newtown. Some of us have thought about our own children. A few of us have napped, though not many. You have to remember, I see all of you from up here. Some of us have checked Facebook, text, and email, and I have seen you do that as well. A greater portion of us, I hope, have reconsidered what gun violence, not gun ownership, not the Second Amendment, not the policies of the NRA, gun violence, what it does to communities and is doing currently to our collective sense of well-being. Guys, you attend a small college that challenges you. Its mission statement says that, and I'll quote, "Wabash College educates men to think critically, act responsibly, lead effectively, and live humanely." You've heard that before, dozens of times. I know you have. As you are educated to live humanely, I hope that you will not forget Newtown. I hope that you will engage in the national conversation about gun violence and its costs. Because I believe that living humanely is more than a soundbite. It's more than a marketing ploy. Living humanely tells us who we are. Thank you so much for coming today.
All right, a few brief announcements. The baseball game against Franklin has been moved to Friday, tomorrow. Saturday, baseball has a doubleheader here versus Dominican University, and the track meet this Saturday has been canceled. Please rise and sing Old Wabash. Da 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 da.